Hey scrapbookers, I'm Tricia Morris from Club Scrap with the Sea Breeze Assembly Line Scrapbooking Workshop. And I've got a copy of my instructions here, and you can get these online or with a purchase of the collection. And I've got my goodies. I'm going to set all of those things aside for now and just focus on sorting out the papers in the order that we'll be trimming them. I also have an accordion pocket file. This is something that you have access to as a Club Scrap member, a video to help you make one of these for yourself. It's a very helpful video, and then that can also be purchased from our website. I have some Velcro here, and I can just place this lip of the accordion pocket file underneath my trimmer base, and that's where I can sort everything as I'm preparing to make 8 pages all at the same time. So if you grab your stack of paper, let's just dig through this and we'll plan ahead for our best success. I'm going to look at my instructions right on page 2, and it lists the off-white plain as the first sheet needed. So just sort through the pile of papers that you have here, find the off-white plain, just one of them, and we're going to place that on our trimmer base. And next we'll look for the rope print, which in my case is right at the top of the stack. I'm going to turn that face down on top of my trimmer base, followed by one sheet of this bottle print. There's the bottle right there, that face down on my trimmer if you're sensing a pattern here. Then we have a teal plain, because it's the same on both sides, it can just be placed in the pile. Then find a yellow plain, followed by a light blue plain. Now there are several blues in here, so just make sure you grab the one that looks most like a sky blue color. And there are 2 here, so just grab one. And then there's going to be an 8.5 by 11 size sheet of paper. And what's fun about these 2 sheets, we're going to use both of them, is that you're going to learn some cutting tricks to turn these into photo mats. So 2 pale green planes. Then I want you to find, this is usually at the back of the pile, but maybe the second to last sheet in your stack. There should be a sheet of cut apart strips. Put those face down, followed by one additional sheet of cut aparts. And now we're getting into what will become the base of all of our layouts. So I'll help you organize those as well. We'll just keep building on our pile. So let's find the other off-white print. That's going to be the base of layout number 8. So we're kind of sorting from bottom to top here. Then the other bottle print, followed by one rope print, and then one light blue plain. This is getting easier and easier for me here. And then you need 2 green planes, and lastly 2 teal planes. That should be everything that you have in your kit. And that's the joy of a Club Scrap approach to our scrapbooking, is that we want to use everything that we send to help you create pages that are ready to go with as little waste as possible. Okay, so let's take this first off-white plain. We'll put it in the trimmer, and I want you to find 6 inches. Now before you slice, if you're using this trimmer model, make sure that you take your left hand and stabilize on the clear bar. It cuts the paper like butter. Now you have 2 6 by 12 strips. We're going to stack those neatly together, place them horizontally into the trimmer, in other words, the long way, and we will cut at 8 and 4. The trimmer does a beautiful job of cutting 2 pieces at a time. Now let's use our accordion pocket file to organize these photos and the spots where they're going to end up. So take 2 of these photo mats and put them horizontally into pocket labeled 1 and 2. So just side to side is the best way. Then take 2 and place them in the pocket labeled 5 and 6. And then the 2 remaining 4x6s go in pockets 7 and 8. I'm going to take the next sheet that we have, which is the rope print, and place it in the trimmer with the largest area of sea glass on your left, and there should be a starfish in the lower left corner and some shells in the upper right corner. And we'll trim at 8.5 and 5. So it just preserves the entire area of the rope print. Now let's take the piece that's currently in the base of your trimmer, and we're going to file that in pocket 1 and 2 at a slight angle, since the width of the pocket is also 12 inches. And I just want to show you how that goes in. So if it goes in at an angle like this, I can still see the numbers on my pockets. That's kind of important. Then the very next strip should have no sea glass on it. It's just a wood grain. We're going to cut this horizontally at 11 1/4, 7 1/2, and 3 3/4. Notice that I always stabilize on the clear bar for every cut. You should have 3 rectangles that are the same size. Place those in pocket 5 and 6. There will be a little, very tolerable amount of scraps. I'm going to set that aside. And then you have the roped area with the shells. That will be placed in pocket 1 and 2 with the other larger piece. Moving right along, we'll take the bottle print, put it into the trimmer with a bottle in the lower left corner. We'll cut at 8 3/4 and 4 1/2. All right, the portion with the bottle and the portion with the shell will both be placed into pocket 3 and 4, again at an angle. And then the last portion with the starfish, that goes in 7 and 8. Now let's take the teal plain. We're going to make some really narrow strips. Now when we do that, the number I give you will be a large number. So 11 3/4, that's a real number. And then 11 1/2. 10 3/4, 10, and 6. That's lots of little strips there. Now take that 6 by 12 and rotate it so it's horizontal and cut at 8 and 4. You'll notice that as I'm trimming, I'm letting the paper pile up next to my blade and keeping it in the order that it landed. And that'll be the approach for every single piece we trim together. Okay, so all 3 of these 4 by 6s get filed in pocket 3 and 4. Pick up just the next strip. This is currently 4 by 12, and we'll cut horizontally at 9 and 6. This piece in the trimmer base gets filed in pockets 7 and 8. And then we have these other 2 rectangles. Place those in 5 and 6. Now we have 4 more really little strips. Sometimes they like to sneak under the trimmer base. There are 2 larger strips. Those will be filed in 7 and 8. And these 2 really skinny guys will be placed in 5 and 6. If at any time I'm going too fast, just pause until you can get yourself regrouped. Okay, so we're moving on to the yellow plain, a bunch of narrow strips here and a lot. Okay, so 11 3/4, 11 1/2, 11 1/4, 11, 10 3/4, 10 1/2, oh my goodness, and 6 1/4. Rotate the 6 1/4. And we'll cut at 8 1/2 and 4 1/4. So you just made 2 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. What's nice about this size paper is that you can literally put a 4 by 6 photo onto it and have it perfectly matte. We'll pocket those in 1 and 2. Now there's a narrower rectangle that's left. We're going to trim that horizontally at 6 and 3. Place these 2 rectangles in pocket 1 and 2, and then we have this other piece that's currently 4 1/4 by 12. We'll cut that horizontally at 6 1/4, and that's different size pieces. That's intentional. They both go in pocket 1 and 2. Now we have tons and tons of these little tiny strips, plus there is a smaller scrap, so you can dispose of that if you can. So let's take them in pairs. So 1 pair of these yellow strips goes in pocket 1 and 2. The next pair, 3 and 4. The next pair, 7 and 8. Light blue is next. We'll cut this at 10 1/2 and 6 1/4. Rotate and cut at 8 1/2 and 4 1/4. This is the same as we did before. Both of these larger rectangles go in 5 and 6. Take the smaller rectangle, we'll cut horizontally again at 6 and 3. And file both of these in 7 and 8. This should be another repeat as well. This longer piece goes In horizontally, we'll cut it 6 1/4. Both of these unequal sized pieces go in 7 1/8. And then you should have a longer strip, 3 4. Once again, a very tolerable tiny little scrap. Moving on to these 8 1/2 by 11 pale green. Let's cut the first one vertically. So it's, you know, if it's in the trimmer, this is the 8 1/2 inch side. We'll cut it 4 1/4, so we're cutting it in half. Then you can take both of those 4 1/4 by 11 inch pieces and stack them neatly, cut horizontally at 6 1/4. So now we have two larger, those go in 7 1/8, and then two smaller go in 3 4. Another similar trick with this guy. So, but this time we're going to cut horizontally at 10 1/2 and 6 1/4. Rotate this piece that's in the base and cut it 4 1/4. So there you just made two 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 pieces that both go in 3 4. Now I have a rectangle. We'll cut that horizontally at 6 1/4. That gives me a third piece of that size going in pocket 3 4. Then we have this small rectangle. Right now it's 2 1/4 by 4 1/4. We'll cut horizontally at 4 and 2. Bear with me, every cut has a purpose. These rectangles will be placed in 3 4. And I'm sorry to tell you all that these are scraps. Those will be the only scraps for the entire project. So from all of your paper to make 8 layouts, this is the only thing that will end up in the circular file. Okay, moving still with our trimmer, we're going to grab our sheet of cut aparts. And if you look carefully at the very edge of these strips, you're going to see a very pale cutting guideline or registration mark, whatever you want to call them, both at the top and bottom of each strip. So this is kind of nice with this model of trimmer. When I place this into the trimmer, you always want the narrowest border strips on your right. And if I find, about 10 3/4, I can see if I look carefully at the top and bottom edge where my trimmer blade is, that the edge of the steel blade is aligned with those guidelines. Stabilize and cut. Now what you want to do also is let those pieces pile up in the order they landed. And that cut occurred at 10 1/4, and then 9 3/4, and 8 1/2. You really don't need those numbers, but some people like to hear them anyway. Then 7 1/4. To the next registration mark is 5 1/4. And finally 3 1/4. So now this first larger cut apart is placed in pocket 5 and 6. Then what I like to do is carefully pick up all the remaining pieces that have stacked in the order they landed from the table and then file them accordingly. It's just how it works a little faster. This piece goes in pocket 7 and 8. The starfish border, 3 and 4. Happiness is a quiet walk, that's 5 and 6. Star of the show, 3 and 4. Then you have two dotted strips. They both go in 7 and 8. And lastly, this sea glass strip is 5 and 6. Now I'll take the very next strip and place it into the trimmer with the word peace in the lower right corner. Our first cut's at about 10 1/2. Then 7 3/4 and 4. Now we're going to rotate and cut at around, it's like 6 3/8 if you have it all lined up perfectly. All right, this top section will go in pocket 3 and 4. And the piece of the lantern, 1 and 2. Now we have some more trimming to do on this long strip. So let's trim that horizontally with the shells on the right at 9 1/4. And 6 1/2. 3 3/4. Okay, find our treasures that will be placed in 1 and 2. Then there's a horizontal journaling prompt, 7 and 8. There's a vertical journaling prompt. We're going to flip that over to the plain side and put that in pocket 5 and 6, along with the shell image, 5 and 6. More trimming to do on this piece. Place it in there with the word tranquility on the right, and we'll cut it 9 3/4. And 6 1/2, and 3 1/4. All right, the shell goes in 1 and 2. The starfish, 1 and 2. Seashells, this is 7 and 8. Tranquility, 7 and 8. Lastly, we'll place this horizontally with the word peace on the right. We'll cut at 9 1/4. This gets filed in 7 and 8, and peace goes in 1 and 2. And now the fun part. We're done with all of the trimming, which I think is fun too, because it's so incredibly efficient and quick, and there's no deliberation involved. I'll set this aside. You always want to make sure that you hang on to your accordion pocket file before moving your trimmer, because the trimmer really does hold it upright. Once it's off the trimmer, I lay it on its back. And I'm going to have you go ahead and slide in the very next piece in your pile. So you've got this remaining pile. This is the base of all of your pages, going from page number 8 to number 1. We're starting at what I call the dry fit process, and that's simply where we take the contents of our pockets and distribute them to the pages without using adhesive. That way, if something got misfiled or if I made a mistake, I can fix it before I start gluing things down. So in my instructions too, I'm going to turn to the last page, page 5, looking at the bottom layout, and I can see layout number 8 here. Now, if I was working at home with more space, I would also take the base for layout 7 and place it right next to, and distribute all of the pieces at the same time. But just so that you can see a little bit more closely, I'll do it one page at a time. I've emptied everything from pocket number 7 and 8, so make sure you're grabbing the last pocket and not the first one. And I'm just going to consult the picture in my instructions and see if I can recreate what I see without adhesive. So I've got aqua border strip running across here, and sometimes if you can't really identify what you're seeing, it could very well be a piece of ribbon. So just keep that in mind as you're working. Then I have a photo mat in this light blue, and then I have a larger mat here and also in light blue that should team up nicely with this dark teal mat. There's a border strip that has the word memories, so I'll place that below here. And I believe that there is a length of this pretty satin ribbon going across, so I'll trim off I'd say like a 14-inch piece of that so I can wrap the tails of the ribbon around to the back. And then that's where I have this journaling prompt up here at the top. Eventually I'll add some of these cool enamel dots to the left edge of this. And then there's also one of these shell die cuts, and you don't have to mess around with those at this point. I just really want to make sure that I have the basic elements of this layout in place. So since we're stacking, I'm going to now take the base for layout 7 and put it on top of what I have going on with layout 8. And the rest of the items that came from my pocket should be what I need to complete this page. Now I already see an error. I forgot to add this piece here on layout number 8 along the right edge, so I can kind of see that starfish up in the right corner. That's why we do this, so we can catch ourselves, prevent missing things. Then I have some pale green 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 mats, and then they should have a mate, so I can take the 4 by 6 ivory and nest that right on top. Across the top edge, I'm going to create a nice little border strip here. And then sea breezes. Oh, I found some yellow strips. This is going to help subdivide my page. This vertical yellow strip will be placed, kind of creating a box shape, a rectangular shape around these mats. And then I have 2 horizontal light blue, and that should nest perfectly with this. And I'll finish that with a shell. And I also did a little trick here with a craft knife where I made a cut along the edge of the bottle so that I could slide this photo mat beneath. And I can show you a little bit later how that finishes up. I see that I also forgot to place my yellow little separator here, right next to this strip on page 8. So now I think I have everything placed on these two layouts. If not, it's okay. Nothing's glued down. Once I do the dry fit process and finish that, I will go back and glue things down and show you how the pages turned out. Okay, so now we have another base. This is the rope print and the base for layout 5 and 6. Or, I'm sorry, 6. So I'm going to empty the pocket labeled 5 and 6. We're going to start out with some some light blue mats horizontally here. And they should have a nesting mate. And then I have 2 smaller mats here that should have a companion. Now, if you remember, we filed that plain side up, so that's why I had that plain side up. I had enough journaling opportunities, so I chose to use that differently. But you can absolutely use the journaling prompt right side up if you prefer. It's entirely up to you. I'll add the little, just so that I know that's where that's going to be, that little silver charm. Now, the light blue is the base for my next page. Across the bottom, I'll add this Sea Breeze's Perfume to My Soul, and then a teal strip just above that, and we'll add this adorable little shell sparkly die cut there. Then we're going to have a border strip that does not have any text on it, and then we'll take those 3 pieces from that wood grain area of the print, and we're going to place them horizontally. If they're vertical, there's going to be too much space between each one. That just fits perfectly. Followed by our title strip with text, and then a really narrow piece across the top. Ta-da! There is everything we need for 5 and 6. Okay, I'll slide over the base for layout number 4 and empty the pocket labeled 3 and 4. The piece that has the large starfish will be in the bottom, and then we have 2 shorter pale green mats, but it looks like before we add that I need a strip. Here we go. It's this starfish strip. Nice. Okay, then a mint green larger mat nested with this 4x6 teal. Around that you can wrap some of this really sweet little chiffon ribbon that goes around the right edge of that piece. And then we have a journaling prompt that's going to kind of fit right in here. So that's another advantage to having this dry fit phase, is you can sort of tweak where things are placed before they actually are laid down. And I can also see that in between, it's very subtle, but in between these 2 pieces, the strip and the print, there is a yellow just one of those really narrow strips there. Okay, then on top of that, I will slide the other green base, and let's nest You Are the Star of the Show together. On the left edge of this, we'll put our bottle portion of the bottle print, and then we're going to separate these 2 areas with a yellow strip. This goes horizontally on top of that. An opportunity for 2 smaller little photos. Those are great spots for sunset pictures, let me just say. And then we can add our starfish to the starfish reference in the border strip. Then 2 vertical mats here, nesting with 2 more 4x6s. Again, a little bit of carryover now. You have the more chiffon ribbon that you can use to tie a bow and add it to this area. I'll do a quick tutorial on how I tie those bows. Basically, I just take the ribbon and I make 2 loops, or 2 little bunny ears, and then cross them. And then whichever one is on the top, I swing it through the loop by bringing it around to the back, grabbing that little loop, and then pull. That always just gives me a really nice shaped bow. You'll want to even out the lengths of the loops, and then pull again until you're satisfied. It's just as a nice bow, and I usually use something like a glue line or something like that to adhere it right to my page title. Okay, so that's bow making 101. Now I've taken everything out of the pocket labeled 1 and 2, and that means my accordion pocket file is completely empty. And it's never a bad thing to just double check that each pocket is truly empty, that you haven't forgotten something. And I'll slide over, I'll set this bow aside, it's kind of bulky. I'll slide over the teal plain that was allocated for layout 1 and 2. And then the shell portion of the rope print will be flanked right at the bottom edge, like aligned with the edge. And then a vertical yellow mat. We should have some smaller yellow rectangles. Oh, we're going to separate again, so create some space definition here. We got a nice little yellow strip here. And if everything went according to plan, this should nest right onto these yellow rectangles, followed by another little cut apart at the top. This is a great spot to add the word relax. Now, if you're wondering how I adhere all of these objects, we have a product we call bookbinding glue here at Club Scrap. It's great for making books, but it's also wonderful for adhering things. And I take that glue out of the main bottle and I put it into one of our needle-tipped applicators. And then I will use that narrow, fine detailed tip to add adhesive to the back of the relax wood thing when I'm ready to place it. And I also use it to adhere these narrow little strips of paper. Just to squiggle some of this adhesive right onto the strip, and that way it's easy to place it. I'm not going to do that quite yet. We have one more piece to work with, and we'll take our rope print with the starfish way in the left corner here, and I believe that there is some ribbon running across this. So again, a 14-inch piece is great, and I'm also going to repeat what I did on the other side. I like to mirror what's happening on both sides of each page. And then we'll have some larger yellow mats that will have a companion off-white, and then this should fit right onto the remaining elements. And then if you want, you can take a piece of the yellow ribbon, and I like to cut a little V into it by folding the ribbon in half. And we'll cut it just long enough so it peeks out from behind the word piece. And this is going to serve as a little anchor for this word right here. Finish with a little shell, among other details. Okay, so I think I'm ready for my gluing down phase of the project, and then once I finish that, we'll come back together and I'll give you a few more tips. And I primarily use ATG tape to do the big jobs of adhering everything to my pages. I have a great history of having wonderful success with that, and it's the most efficient item that I use for adhering. And then of course I do use the bookbinding glue in a needle tipped applicator for the smaller objects and charms. So we'll be right back. Now, as I'm assembling page 5 here, I thought it would be worth just a second of our time to go over how I make sure everything is centered and straight on my pages. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up with the elements in this collection. And for my first strip here, I'm just going to choose to adhere this a quarter of an inch up from the bottom edge of the page. So basically with my grid ruler that we have here at Club Scrap, each dotted line, each cube formed by either a dotted or straight line on this ruler equals 1/8 of an inch. So the very first solid line I have here is 1/4 of an inch. And now I know that my ruler is placed exactly level with the bottom edge of my page, and it's 1/4 of an inch up from the edge. So I'm adding adhesive to my border strip, and then I'll rest this strip onto the edge of the ruler and then drop it into place. Next, I'll add this little piece of teal paper, and it looks like I just have a very small gap, maybe about 1/4 of an inch between the border strip and then the little piece. And I'm just going to get creative here, and I'm going to put my glue right along the edge of the ruler. This is that bookbinding glue I mentioned from the needle tip applicator. And then I'll take this narrow strip and just, again, rest it right on the ruler's edge and drop it into place on my glued area. That way I know it's nice and straight. I have this propensity of gluing things down crooked, so that really helps solve the problem. And then I ran out of adhesive. Isn't that how it goes? And I'm going to rest this piece, knowing it's already straight, onto the teal strip. Okay, now this ruler has something wonderful called the zero center. And I'm going to make sure I have a 6 here, a 6 here. That way I know where my center is. And I can align these 3 pieces onto my page perfectly centered. So I'm going to try to match the measurement from the left to the right edge, and it looks like 1 7/8 is going to be my measurement. And then the other 2 pieces go on either side, equal distance apart, and now I know that these 3 pieces are going to be level. So at this point, just starting a new roll of adhesive here, I'll apply adhesive to the back of the 3 pieces, and I'm shooting for 1 7/8. I always start from the center first, and then I'll adhere this about 3/16 of an inch away, level with the edge of the ruler, and same thing here. So now I have a nice trio of centered pieces, and then above that I can add my strip. So I'm going to bring my ruler to the top here and make sure it's nice and level, rest it against the ruler's edge and drop it into place. Lastly, I can take my glue again and run it along the top edge of this strip and finish with my final teal border. As promised, I'm going to show you how I added this little piece to layout number 7 and put the corner of this behind the bottle. So basically to do that, you need a nice cutting mat, and we have those at Club Scrap. We have our beautiful blue cutting mats here. And you need to have sort of a knowledge of where the piece will ultimately end up. A pencil. So I'm placing this photo mat temporarily into its spot, and I know I want it to go behind the bottle. So I'll make a little mark along the edge of the bottle at the point at which the mat touches the artwork here. I remove the mat, and I'm going to cut along the bottle's edge with the craft knife, starting where the first pencil mark is, going along the edge of the bottle, and stopping where the second pencil mark is. Now, if you want, make sure you have a nice clean eraser and remove the 2 pencil marks. Next, take the photo mat and slide it behind the bottle. Once you sort of know where it's going to be, you can add some adhesive, put it back in its place, and stick it down. And if you want, you could secure the back of the corner on the back of the page as well. But that's in a nutshell how those pieces get attached. And then I will show you quickly, here's that silver charm, and I will take some of my bookbinding glue around the edge and place it where I want it to be. And all I need to do is just give it some time, and when I come back, that is not going to go anywhere. Okay, let's make one final review of all of the finished pages now that everything's been adhered. This is layout 1, and again at the bottom I had that pretty V-cut ribbon just placed right underneath the piece quote. If you wanted to, you could pop that with some of our foam adhesive circles. That works really good for a low profile dimension. And then you can see already the glue has cured onto the cut apart with this silver charm. That's not going anywhere, which I love about that particular adhesive. I only just started applying all of my little sparkly enamel dots, and I got 4, 1 in each corner of this die cut, and then added the Relax Woodward again with the bookbinding glue. Finally tied a bow entirely around this cut apart and just made a regular old knot. If the cut apart is small like this, I just tie the bow around the whole thing, but if it's much longer, then I just make a bow and then I wrap the ends around and cut them shorter along the back, so my ribbon can go a little further that way. Here we have layout number 3 with our adorable starfish added to the title strip on the left side of the layout. And layout 4, again, more ribbon here that corresponds with and complements the one on the opposing page. You'll notice that the space between all of these elements is about the same, and I try to make a habit of doing that when I attach the elements on my layouts. Here's the one we kind of walked through together with my nice straight level placement of the border strips and the even distribution from center going out of those 3 pieces. And then I finished by adding the little seashell die cut with my bookbinding glue on the bottom of this cut apart. And then here we have the complementary layout. Looks like this came loose a little bit. I will go back and fix that again later, but again, the spacing between each element is what I'm looking for, and my adhered charm. Then on layout 7, we walked through this together where we tucked the mat behind the bottle, and another charm has been adhered with the glue. And lastly, number 8, and on this one here, the ribbon is wrapping around to the back, and as I explained earlier, I just trim a 14-inch piece and use tape to adhere the ribbon to the back of the layout so that it's not going all the way around, wasting a lot of ribbon. Here I made another bow, just like the one I showed you with the chiffon ribbon. Made the 2 ears, crossed them over, took one through the hole and pulled it tight, and then wrapped the ends around to the back. Finished with one of my sweet little seashell die cuts. And there you have it, the Sea Breeze layouts. I hope you had fun and that you learned a lot of things that you can apply to future pages that you'll be making together with me here at Club Scrap. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join us, and I also invite you to like our page on Facebook and on YouTube so that you don't miss a thing. We'll see you next time.